Hey guys, how's it going? We're in the truck, the noisy old truck, doing a bit of a delivery. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to have another chat about a topic, a little bit more business related this time, and something that I learned out of necessity, really. When I started my job on the farm, it was sort of to come on board with a new enterprise and help run it on farm, cutting chaff, which is just, getting hay and chopping it into little bite-sized pieces for horses, and people use it for other stuff, but my boss got into that and needed an extra worker, and I was working in between another place at the same time, so I just sort of went in there a few days a week. And eventually I ended up running the joint a bit, so it took me down a bit more of a business path, and tried to figure out some things, and like everybody does, do a bit of research on things, and I found a really good book that talks about a concept called lean management, which is comes from Toyota's manufacturing plants, and it's all about efficiency through eliminating waste, which it sounds like everybody in the West, we always talk about growing. Everything's got to be growing all the time, but you can technically grow through reducing waste. You're not growing your revenue, but you're growing your profit, which I see a lot of wasted everything on farm, especially. But when we started cutting chaff, it was all over the show. Like, none of this. We had one fella that came from where we purchased the business from, that worked for us for a while. But my boss and I, we had no clue what we were doing, so there was that learning curve. But there was also the efficiencies of the logistics, and how we dealt with the product after we cut it, and how we got the materials to the shed to make the product. There's a fair bit going on there, and you think it's pretty simple, you just try and make it more efficient, but there's actually a lot to it. And if you go, a lot of people aren't thinking about reducing wasted time like that. Like something as simple as having a spot for a particular tool, that could easily go haywire on a farm. And if you extrapolate out these things, and oftentimes you spend more money on labour finding the tool over the period of 3 weeks than the tool actually costs itself, if it's not put in its right place and kept there when not being used. So yeah, the basic idea of this book, I'll put it up here so anyone can read it. It's called The Lean Farm, and there's actually a second one called The Lean Micro Farm, and it's more based on farm efficiencies. And he's got a vegetable farm, but you'd be surprised on how much you can apply the principles to a big operation, or a bigger operation. We're not big by any stretch, but these things are universal and they apply to everything. It doesn't necessarily mean you should throw out growing your sales, but for us, we don't love cutting chaff. It's a bit of a dusty, hard job to do, and if we could increase how many bags we cut per day, well, first of all, we make more money per bag, so it's less cost per bag in labour, but also sometimes it means a whole less day cutting, which means we can go and do something else on farm. And I think these types of things are important now that a lot of farms are going into multiple enterprises, trying to get out of the commodity game, which is, totally a valid option, because, sometimes the commodity price is unacceptable for farms to make a profit, which is a bit sad, but we're competing with a lot of the world in that game. So, well, what can you control? You can control how much you spend on getting that revenue and make a bit that end. So if you can make the same yield for less costs, well, obviously that's great, and that's sort of where my head's always been at anyway. But yeah, something we've been working on, as you'll see a video on the channel about our shed that we're building, and that's a pretty big project, and you'd think that it's not worth doing, but it actually is, because we'd save, if we can fit 600 bales in there, we fit 14 bales on a truckload. So if we have to store them somewhere else, that's a lot of truckloads we got to bring in to the chaff shed to cut the hay. Going out's fine, because you've added value to the product and sent it off so that you get the cash in hand, but you don't make any money off trucking it out and trucking it back in again. So storage is a big part of the business, and if we can narrow that down, we are actually set to gain a lot. So, if the setup we have right now, it'd take a day to get probably 50 or so bales in, with us carting it ourselves, and that's not including, well, that would be someone driving the truck not flat out and someone unloading the truck at the chaff shed so the truck can go back and load up again. So that's, you're talking 2 days labour and diesel, and we've got to pay whoever's storing it for us, and that ultimately doesn't increase the value of the bag of chaff we sell out of the chaff shed. So we've instead come at it from the perspective of reducing the costs, having it all as on hand as close as we can, and we can make it all more efficient that way. So the main principle that I think the lean stuff really helps you see your process on farm in a different way is trying to eliminate anything that doesn't add value to your end product. So, some might say delivering is a cost, but if you charge a small fee for delivery if it's out of our way, but if it's tied into another load or something, we'll just, drop it off for free if it's a decent order. But if something like that, trucking the hay, that doesn't add value to the product. What adds value is turning the lucerne into a round bale, because now it's in a sellable format, and turning the round bale, putting it through the chaff cutter and putting it into a bag, that adds value, because customers like the conveniency of a 20 kilo bag. And pretty much everything else doesn't add value other than getting it to the shops for them to sell. So things like that, everything else is something that is on the table to be getting rid of if we can. Some things you can't, you just have to live with them. But then the question becomes, well, what's the best way to reduce the cost of this thing? So getting a big old shed up that we can chuck a heap of bales in and they store well. At the moment we store a lot of the hay under tarps, and yes, they're close, but they last about a season, and they're $1,000 each, and they just break in the wind, and the hay bales don't necessarily store that well under them anyway. You end up with 5% loss of the bale probably. So that's something we've looked at and thought, well, there's got to be a better way, and the project is bigger to fix that, so it's a bit of a process, but we've got a second-hand shed and we've mushed it into something that's serviceable and do the job, and we've done it in a way that's going to save us a lot of money without being cheap. There's no point building a shed if it's going to fall down or not keep the hay dry. So these are the types of things that really, on the macro level, you can look at, but also on the micro level in the working day as well. So things like not double handling a bag, how fast your turnaround can be, how each person can have a job and make everything finish at the same time, so we're all ready to get back into work again at the same time and not lose any wastage to time. And then there's things like motion waste. So if our bales were 50 metres from the shed, that's obviously a lot less efficient than if they're right next to a chaff cutter where we can just plonk them straight in and get into cutting again. So then there's simple things like what their workstation looks like, tools they need all the time on hand right next to them. Like I often have a bottle of oil and a grease gun next to where I am up the top. Perhaps I'll do a video on the chaff cutter one day. It's a bit of a fun thing to look at if you sort of know what you're looking at. So things like that, and then how we sharpen up and all these sorts of things. You're pretty much aiming for everything to be a well-oiled machine and to just eliminate waste, basically. But it sounds simple, but you'd be surprised on how many people just keep doing things the same way just because that's how it's been, or you haven't thought about it another way, or you haven't looked at it and thought that this is a bit crap, how can we make this better? So yeah, it's sort of just that mindset of looking at everything on the chopping block and just getting rid of it. The same thing can be applied for cropping. Like we're looking at doing some foliar sprays for fertilising our crops instead of just front loading all of our fertiliser. And you start to learn things about using humic acid, so fulvic acid, to increase the efficiency of your fertilizer, and even something like urea. When applying urea, if you do it as a foliar, you know, you can do it at a much lower rate per kilo per hectare, and even if you have to do an extra pass in the sprayer is pretty easy to get going, and you can do a lot of ground at once that way, so it sort of evens out. Obviously spreading on urea is pretty easy, but then you got to hope for a rain and all the rest, or if you put it in at planting, you're putting it a lot, and you know, you can have some inefficiencies on some of the nutrients that are there that aren't needed at the start, and then it could be gone by the time the plant's up and going and really needs a particular nutrient. So sort of always looking at these sorts of things and seeing if there's a better way. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say about it. I highly recommend the book, The Lean Farm. It's a great read, and there's some other business books as well, but you know, they're all enterprise specific or something like that, and you think you always have that idea in the back of your mind that probably won't work on our farm, or that it's you know, some stupid law might get in the way because we can't process chickens the same way as this farmer does, or you know, something like that. But you know, this lean idea, it's there is no business that can't incorporate these ideas and get value out of it. So that's a good thing in my books. If you can get a better way to run your farm without spending more money, or spending the money to save you a heap of money over the long run, or something like that, then it's worth doing. And if you have a slight change of mindset, then you're really on the right track. So yeah, that's all I have for today. If this audio is no good, then just say, and then I'll stop doing them. So yeah, I can see it's peaking out pretty much the whole time, but it seems to handle it pretty well, so we'll see. If it's too loud, I will scrap this video and talk about it another time. But yeah, have a good one, and keep thinking about things. So yeah, see yous.